time, it is my pleasure to introduce our honored keynote speaker, a Brush High School alum, Dr. Katie Tragillis, formerly known as Katie Muscle. Katie graduated with the class of 2007. Following high school, Katie attended Colorado State University in Fort Collins, where she majored in psychology with a concentration in mind, brain, and behavior. While at CSU, Katie found a passion for neuroscience research, and after receiving a Bachelor of Science, Katie went on to graduate school at the University of Nevada in Reno. During her time as a graduate student, Katie published several research papers on her work in the visual adaptation. She has presented this work at conferences all around the world. And in 2016, she received a fellowship from the National Science Foundation to complete a research project in Singapore. She graduated with her PhD in Cognitive and Brain Sciences in 2017. Following graduate school, she received a fellowship from the National Institute of Health to do postdoctoral research at the Smith Kettlewell Eye Research Institute in San Francisco. She is currently a postdoctorate researcher at the University of Minnesota, where she does work using fMRIs to understand the visual system. Please help give our very own Brush High School alum a warm welcome.
Thank you, Principal Schneider. Hello, class of 2019. You all look great, especially from the lower part of your lips down. Some good fashion choices. Some of the seniors mentioned that you've been together for a long time, so I want to ask you a question. How many of you were at BHS for your entire high school career? How about middle school? Keep them up. Elementary school? How many of you have lived in Brush your entire lives? All right, put your hands down. How many of you are from Fort Morgan? That was a test. Never admit you're from Fort Morgan. Now, whether you've been in Brush for 18 years or 2 months, Brush is where you graduate from high school. Brush is your hometown. From here on out, when you meet someone, one of the very first things they'll ask you is, where are you from? And if you're like me, you'll say Brush, and they'll say, wait, where? And you'll say Brush. It's a little town in northeast Colorado. I was asked this a lot when I first left Brush to go to college. When I graduated from BHS, I had no idea what I wanted to do. My older brother had gone to Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and I wanted to be just like him, though don't tell him that. I went to CSU, but I wasn't sure what my path should be. I was always that person who liked listening to their friends' problems, and I thought I would study psychology and become a psychiatrist or a therapist. However, I quickly realized that I didn't enjoy those classes. I stuck with the major, mostly because the classes were pretty easy, and initially, I was afraid to try something harder. I had done well in high school, but it seemed like everyone I met in college had gone to bigger high schools, with more honors classes and more AP classes. Most people seemed smarter than me, like they knew something that I was supposed to know. And maybe some of you know, maybe like some of you know, I didn't know my potential. My older brother told me that the most important thing in college was just to go to class. So I did. And it seemed like so many of the people around me had not gotten that message. People who seemed so much smarter than me at the beginning of the semester sometimes just disappeared. And pretty soon, just simply by showing up and doing the work, I was doing well. That became a theme in every aspect of my life. I worked a couple of part-time jobs while I was in school, and everyone I worked with began to count on me and give me better shifts and more responsibilities. Not because I was particularly skilled. I was working at Blockbuster, by the way, if any of you were curious about how long ago this was. But I got better shifts at Blockbuster because I would always try to follow through with my commitments. This is the first of a few values that I'd like to talk to you about. Value number 1, show up. Even if it's hard, even if you feel like you're not good enough, stick with it and do the work. You'd be surprised by how far you can get just by making people look at your face over and over again until they remember you. This doesn't just apply to your professional life, by the way. Show up for your friends, show up for your community, and show up for yourself. As I gained more confidence in school, I started taking harder classes. I took a few classes about neuroscience and how the brain works, and I found I loved that topic. And because I loved it, I studied harder for those classes. I was more engaged with professors and was even reading and learning things about the brain just for fun, like a nerd. I decided to volunteer in a research lab for one of the professors that I particularly liked. He studied the visual system and the way the brain interprets information it receives from the eyes. I loved working in that lab. I enjoyed it so much that I decided that that was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. As I neared the end of college, I applied to graduate school so that I could continue to do research. I applied to 5 schools, and I got rejected by 3. I had only been doing research a short time before I graduated from CSU, and so many people who apply to grad school have years of research behind them. Similar to when I first graduated from high school, I felt like I was behind. And I wasn't sure that I was smart enough. I did get into a couple of schools. One of them was in Reno, Nevada. I had never lived outside of Colorado before, and I didn't know very much about Reno, but the research being done there sounded amazing to me. I ended up going to graduate school in Reno for 5 years. That's right, I graduated high school, and then I spent the next 10 years doing more school. But grad school was the best time of my entire life. I loved working with people who were passionate about the same topic that I was, and I learned so much about brains, eyeballs, and how to conduct research. My passion in my work allowed me to present my research at conferences all around the world. I've been to England, Germany, Japan, Indonesia. Next month I'm going to Latvia. I lived in Singapore for a summer doing research. And when I graduated from high school, when I sat where you sit, I had never even been on an airplane. And now my passport is almost full. I found what I love doing, and it has given me experiences that I never could have imagined. Value number 2, do what you love. A lot of you may not know what that is yet. When I was 18, I didn't even know that the job I do now was a thing. I'm a neuroscience researcher. I look at pictures of people's brains, and I use math to figure out what they were looking at when the picture is taken. That's some science fiction nonsense. But that's my job, and I can't imagine doing anything else. Sometimes it takes a while to find the thing that makes you happy, but when you find it, it will lead you places that you might have never expected. When I was about to finish grad school, I started looking for positions. I applied for a job in San Francisco at a pretty prestigious institution. My brother lived nearby, and I had visited there many times. It just seemed like a good fit for me. They accepted my application, and I was given a 1-year contract. I was moving even farther away from Brush and my parents, but this job seemed like a perfect opportunity for me. Almost immediately, though, I knew something wasn't right. I liked the work, but I was commuting 2 hours a day and living in an apartment that I could barely afford, and the research wasn't something I was passionate about anymore. Even though I wasn't happy, I remembered the value I had learned in college, and I still showed up and did the work. Because of that, my boss liked me. She thought I was doing a good job, and she quickly began talking to me about my future at the institution. I wasn't happy, but I found a routine that felt familiar and easy. One day, a particularly hard day, I saw a job posting for a research position at the University of Minnesota to work in one of the best labs in my field, with a researcher whose work I had admired and followed for years. My dream job. I decided to apply, not really believing that I would get it, but to my surprise, I got the offer. Someone there saw my potential. Suddenly, I had a choice. I could stick with the job that I was familiar with, I was secure, or I could reach for something harder, something that challenged me, something that I might fail at, but that had the potential to help me find my passion again. Accepting the position meant making another huge move across the country, once again living far away from my parents, leaving my brother and all of my friends that I had made in San Francisco. Sometimes it feels so unfair that time moves us forward. Every passing day means new challenges, new decisions, new struggles. But one of the greatest things about life is that your experiences move with you. Leaving a place doesn't take away the lessons you learned or the knowledge you gained there. College taught me persistence. Grad school taught me to follow my passion. But the value that has helped me the most came from Brush. I haven't lived here for 12 years now, but it will always be my home. Persistent in my brain will always be the memories of growing up here, of my high school friends, and the house I grew up in. The value that Brush ingrained in me, value number 3, is that moving forward doesn't mean leaving things behind. I took my dream job in Minneapolis, and I've been happily living there for a year now. The work is harder, but I continue to show up and put in the time. My passion for research has returned, and that has already provided me with new opportunities. I've always been a pretty lucky person. I've always had people in my life who support me and who believe in me, but even with all that support, it took me time to believe in my own potential. Some of you may not have felt like you have support or people in your lives who believe in you, but I promise that you are capable of so much more than you may think. Moving forward can be scary, but one thing is certain. You carry your hometown, the values you've gained here, in your hearts, and on the tip of your tongue when people ask, where are you from? Brush, you can say. It's a little town in northeast Colorado. I may have moved forward, but I will never leave it behind. Congratulations, class of 2018. You're gonna do it.